Our House Democrats campaigning on a revenge tour. We got to talk about that, plus additional redistricting efforts in South Carolina and Georgia. We got a lot to break down. The panel's here. Welcome to the Sean Spicer Show. All right, guys, it is Thursday. We have a ton to break down with the panel, and it's going to be a good one. Trust me on this. We've got a lot to get through. A lot being said by House leaders about whether or not the agenda will include a lot of revenge stuff, packing the court, et cetera. And it's not just the normal rank and file. We're going to break it all down. Plus, President Trump, obviously, on this China tour, J.D. Vance doesn't want to talk about the Marco Rubio J.D. Vance ticket. We're going to break down whether that's a good idea. Plus, at a Kevin Hart roast this week, Pete Davidson brought out some pretty nasty jokes. We're going to figure out whether that's waking waves or not in the Republican world. And then Spencer Pratt, what's going on with this race for mayor? Is he actually breaking through? We got a lot to get to with our amazing all-star panel. Plus, tomorrow, Steve Bannon will be joining us. And the next Monday, long-time pollster Scott Rasmussen will be here. Senator Ron Johnson on Tuesday, and Andrew Giuliani gives us a preview of how his dad is doing, plus the upcoming FIFA tour of cities and games. He's going to break it all down for us. Thanks to everyone who has ordered Trump 2.0. Big event at the Kennedy Center. There's still a few tickets left. You can either go to the Trump Kennedy Center website or SeanSpicer.com. The event is tomorrow night. And even if you don't want to see me or talk about my book, it's probably one of the last times that the Trump Kennedy Center will be open for the next couple of years as it goes under these renovations. So come by, check out the building. It's a free event. I'd love to see you. And plus, we get to talk about the book, so we'll have some fun. All right, without further ado, I want to bring in our all-star panel. Democratic strategist and former chief counsel for the House Judiciary Committee, Julian Epstein, former Trump attorney and the author of an amazing book, Defiant Inside the Mar-a-Lago Raid and the Left's Ongoing Lawfare. Back with us, Christina Bobb. And new to the program, trying her out after a first-round draft choice, we traded two folks for Chloe Trapanato from the Daily Wire. Chloe, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Yeah, we had to trade two of the other folks from the Daily Wire, so Matt Walsh and Shapiro won't be appearing anymore.
They were my predecessors. That is a lot
we traded
to live up
them.
to.
We got you in the deal. It's pretty big. Chloe, I will start with you though as the newbie. A lot of times, Democrats at the rank and file level, and this is for both parties, to be honest with you, we'll make comments and we'll talk about if we get in control. And there's a guy on the left who always has something to say. His name's Ted Lieu. And he was talking the other day, he's a California congressman, about what would happen if they got the majority. Let me play it for you.
This is a radical Supreme Court that is making decisions simply to benefit Republicans. It's going to usher in massive Supreme Court reform when Democrats take control. And that will be because of the actions of extreme political actor John Roberts in this partisan Supreme Court.
All right, Chloe, these guys are talking about, because the rulings aren't going their way, they want to pack the court, they want to change the court, they want to weaponize the court. I mean, this to me is something that we've always said that this is part of the agenda, but now we're hearing it more and more.
Right, because they cannot win on policy or on merit. They spent 8 years attacking the president, all for him to win a second term non-consecutively, win both the electoral majority and the popular majority, which they also do not seem to understand whatsoever, especially Pete Buttigieg. But Democrats know that. They know how unpopular they are. This is why we see Ted Lieu and all of them coming out now. Recent CNN polling is suggesting just as much, because they stand for nothing. So, of course, to win back power, they're going to stoke outrage, tell lies, pretend we're afflicted by the ghost of the Confederacy, which is something that Hakeem Jeffries said the other day, which does not make any sense because the Confederacy was a Democratic project. But the Democrats will obviously subvert all of our democratic and constitutional guardrails to get what they want.
Julian, this is your wheelhouse. You were, I mean, obviously the Senate has a lot to say, but you were the top dog on the House Judiciary Committee. This isn't just Ted Lieu. I mean, and I say this because we've got some folks on our side that say some stuff. You guys got some folks on your side. But this is what Hakeem Jeffries said, Julian. And I want to play you because, again, this is a little different than some rank and file member saying stuff. This is Hakeem Jeffries.
Period of time, we do have these structural problems that need to be addressed. We've got to, for instance, make sure we pass the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act so we can end the era of voter suppression in the United States of America once and for all. We have to end Citizens United, dramatically reform our campaign finance laws to stop the ability of these deep-pocketed special interests to intervene. And we are going to have to explore massive judicial reform, state by state and at the federal level, and everything should be on the table as far as I'm concerned.
All right, Julian, let's just take it from backwards to forwards. Like, everything should be on the table. Is it a good political move for Democrats to be talking about potentially packing the court ahead of the midterms?
I'm not sure how many voters are paying attention to that. I don't know that people even know what packing the court means. I think from the sense of the health of the polity, I think it's a disaster. There's been a fair amount of academic research on this, Sean. The reason for the political polarization in our country is mostly because the Democratic Party has moved left. So when you hear people like Alan Dershowitz saying, I'm leaving the party, and so many other centrists like myself who are dismayed about the direction of the party in the last 5 years, this is one of the reasons. The essence of our system is separation of powers, and key to that is an independent judiciary. And when you start doing what Democrats are talking about doing in Virginia, which is sacking the entire Supreme Court, lowering the retirement age to 54, or packing the Supreme Court at the federal level, it's really the end of the independent judiciary. It is a sort of my way or the highway, the ends justify the means mentality, and it's a race to the bottom at that point. And then Republicans can come in and move the Supreme Court from 15 to 21. I mean, it's really the beginning of the end of our constitutional democracy. And it's a shame that the Democrats are doing this. They talk about being the party of democracy, but they wanted to keep the major opponent off the ballot. They wanted to jail the major political opponent in the last election. They talk about sort of importing tens of millions of voters to secure what I think would be one-party rule. I think is the reason for it. I can't think of any other reason at this point. They want to get rid of the filibuster. They want to add 2 more states. It's all about, I think, one-party rule for the Democrats, and it's mostly because the Democrats, rather than meeting the voters where they are, which is the political center, they are being led by the nose by the extremists in the activists and the academic communities, and that's why the policies have taken them so far left. Their approval rating is 24%, 25% right now. And sort of rather than having a sister soldier moment and moving to the political center, where I would like to see them to move, they are looking for all of these structural changes to achieve one-party rule into the future. And I think it's a disaster. I think it's an insult to the founding fathers. It's an insult to the basic structure of our democracy, and it's the wrong direction for the party.
Christina Bobb, you're an attorney. You've someone defended President Trump. You went through this. Obviously, that's the whole focus of your book. Ro Khanna said the next Democrat White House does not need court reform commission like some college seminar. We need action. We need term limits for justice. We need to expand this morally bankrupt court from 9 to 13. They're not hiding it anymore. This is the agenda. No. So what should be our response? Like, should we just say, hey, like Julian said, the common sense might prevail, or should we make it clear what's at stake?
No, I think, we absolutely need to make it clear what's at stake, because as Julian said, I don't think the majority of the electorate understands what all of this actually means and what it looks like. And I think Democrats are actually banking on that. They're banking on an uninformed electorate, which is why so much of their news information is lies. They're lying to the American people. They're talking about voter suppression, saying, oh, we need to reverse voter suppression. Well, any normal person would be like, well, I don't want voter suppression. What they don't explain is suppressing the votes of illegal voters. The average American who wants to vote in an election hasn't really had a hard time being able to do that. The left is trying to create incentives for illegal voters to now vote. They're putting misinformation out there about, they're trying to prevent, or we need to allow citizens or non-citizens who live in the area and work in the area to be able to vote in just local elections. We'll just start with local elections. So it's these kind of crazy stories. And the fact that they're going after the judiciary now is incredibly concerning, but unsurprising to me. I'm sitting here as a criminal defendant for my reporting on the 2020 election 6 years later. My case is still open. And they're abusing the courts. And we have to be very clear. This is a small minority of people. And the reason they have to try to change the rules and change the game is because most Americans don't want this. I don't even think most Democrats want this. I will go out on a limb and give the opposing party the benefit of the doubt that they actually are good Americans that want good things for our country. And they don't want these kinds of crazy reforms. And so a small minority of people have to try to cajole the media, cajole the courts. Basically, they can't win the game because their policies are not popular. So they're trying to flip the board.
So look, I think a lot of these comments stem from what's going on in redistricting, right? That they didn't get the decisions they liked, and therefore this is happening. So let's go down that, because Hakeem Jeffries noted that, right? He said, we've got to right these wrongs and we've got to do all this stuff. And Chloe, I'll go to you. I mean, right now, South Carolina is going to go into a special session. And I think they will ultimately take this Clyburn seat, North Charleston area. But this is a lot what this comes down to. The Voting Rights Act protected Democrats in these seats, right? And it's undone that. So now you have Clyburn in South Carolina in particular that's got his district up for grabs. Brian Kemp in Georgia calling a special election for Georgia. A lot of these seats happening, but the Democrats are claiming this is a race issue. And I guess the issue is, do we just ignore it on our side and say, hey, that's you guys' problem, like the voters don't care? Because they're trying to get Black Americans motivated ahead of the midterms, fire them up, talk about Jim Crow 2.0, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, first of all, Jim Clyburn, he needs to go. We've had 23 years of Jim Clyburn. The flame is no longer Clyburning. There is no wick left. The candle is toast. I think, like you said, Republicans in South Carolina are going to continue pushing on this, and they should. And Republicans could get as many as 14 seats from these new House maps that we're enacting in Texas, Missouri, North Carolina, Ohio, Florida, Tennessee. And like you said, they are just doing this because they're so abysmal on policy and merit. That I think Republicans could actually keep the House come November if they continue to do this. And it's not racial gerrymandering, obviously. It's funny to me that Barack Obama, just a couple weeks ago, was saying how much he loved gerrymandering. And it was totally fine for them to do it all over Virginia when they were subverting all of Republican votes in that state. But then when Tennessee or South Carolina tries to do it, they claim racism. And we know that because of this redistricting in Tennessee, it could lead to the first Black women or the first Black woman to be elected in Tennessee. It doesn't make any sense to me, but I wonder if they know how hypocritical they sound or if they are totally blissfully unaware of it. That's what I can't figure out.
Julian, I'll push this over to you to take off what Chloe just said. When Virginia passed this referendum to initially that went from a 6-5 Democratic majority in Virginia to a 10-1, Hakeem Jeffries famously said F-A-F-O, F around, find out. And he was all excited. When the Virginia court said you didn't follow Virginia law or the Virginia Constitution and how you executed this is what he had to say. He talks about a meltdown. Take a listen.
Because we know this unprecedented assault on Black political representation, the likes of which we have not seen since the Jim Crow era, the ghost of the Confederacy has afflicted the United States Supreme Court majority and is invading and haunting the nation right now, and we take that seriously. And we know it's going to continue, which is why Democrats are committed to launching a decisive and overwhelming response in advance of the 2028 election to ensure that it's the American people who are the ones who get to decide who's in the majority in the House, who's in the majority in the Senate, and ultimately in 2028, who gets elected as the next president of the United States of America.
All right, Julian, I want to sort of focus us on the political messaging for a second. Obviously, you approach a lot of this as a lawyer and from a policy standpoint. But is this a smart message? And maybe it is for like the base to think that this is what gets them fired up the most. But to be talking about Jim Crow 2.0, et cetera, is that the right message that the Democratic Party wants to hear or motivates them? Like this seems to be where everybody's going, that this is racism, this is undermining, this is sending us back, when in fact the court recognized quite the opposite, how much we have advanced as a country.
I think that's right what you said, Sean. I think the problem with the modern Democratic Party, just to segue my last comment, is that it has two answers for every problem. It's either to call someone a racist or to expand the welfare state. And the Democratic Party doesn't stand for much more beyond that. Is it good politics? I think a lot of people hear the rhetoric. I don't think Hakeem Jeffries is the best messenger. I don't think he's a very effective public speaker. I think a lot of black voters listen to that, and I think people sort of yawn. That was the kind of thing that was said in Georgia when Georgia passed its voting reform in 2022, and black voter participation went up. Black voter participation in some cases exceeds white voter participation, and they're very close in most elections. The Voting Rights Act was never about jamming voters of one race into a district so that a particular race could win that election. It was never about that. I mean, just read the law. The law, a 1965 law amended in 1982, was about removing impediments to voting. Actual impediments like literacy. There's nothing in the Voting Rights Act for these single-member districts, and these single-member districts, I think, are in fact a form of segregation, which means that most candidates, most public officials can actually ignore the black or the Hispanic vote because they've been segregated. They've been actually sort of apartheided into a single district. And I think it also creates the dynamic of a sort of grievance politics, a zero-sum grievance politics, us against them. So I don't think it's good for the polity. As for politics, I mean, I think, again, Democrats have been playing this game now for several years, which is every time there is voting reform, be it voter ID or whether it is a reasonable interpretation of the Voting Rights Act. I wrote a piece in the New York Post a week ago saying this is a perfectly reasonable interpretation of the Voting Rights Act, even if it may not help Democrats. I think sort of this is more hyperbolic language. This is more sky is falling. I don't think it really resonates. I don't think most people are thinking about it. And to Chloe's earlier point, we could be looking at a massive change here. If you consider not just the gerrymandering, not just the Voting Rights Act, but what's happening with the census in 2030, you could be seeing a shift of 40 seats in the House if you do the math.
Yeah.
And that is another reason why the Democrats should be moving back to where the voters are, which is the political center, rather than playing this game where the academic and the activist left, where they are really, really out of touch with most of the voters, particularly on cultural issues. So can
I ask you real quick, when you wrote that piece, did your own party, your buddies, your former colleagues, were they pissed that you said that?
Yeah, I get two reactions because I criticize the party a lot because I think the party's gone bonkers on just I don't recognize it. If you compare Trump's positions to Clinton's positions in the 90s, Clinton and Trump's positions on most of the major issues are almost identical. I mean, you go down welfare, immigration, balanced budget, you go down the whole list. So where the Democrats were a generation ago is sort of where Trump is now on a lot of issues. Trump is actually to the left of them on things like trade. So what I get is you're a traitor. How could you do this? Trump is terrible. I ask them, why? What is it about Trump's policy, leave his behavior aside, that you dislike so much? And they sort of get spaghetti brained on me.
Right, of course.
But more importantly, Sean, much more importantly, because it's a very important question, a lot of sort of Democrats will say, I wish I could say what you just said, but if I say it, I will lose my job or I will be voted off the island. But you're exactly right. And the problem with the Democrats, and you have a little bit of this on the Republican side too, the problem with the Democrats is that the people who know that the party has gone way too far left don't have the courage to stand up and say it for fear of retribution.
Yeah. Well, there's things in our party that happen sometimes where, I mean, just to be honest, when you're in the game, it's difficult. But the interesting thing, Chloe, that's fascinating about how the two parties approach this. The thing that's so fascinating about the approach is that, our side, on the Republican side, views this very differently. And our black Republicans who win in majority white districts. Wesley Hunt down in Texas, who's been a great member. He's a West Point grad. Here's what he had to say on the issue of the Dem rhetoric.
seeing a lot of talk from my colleagues on the left, too, as we shift toward this reinvigorated talk about Jim Crow, the past of this country. And as someone who is a direct descendant of a slave, as someone whose great-great-grandfather was born on a plantation, I can assure you, slavery is over. Jim Crow is dead. When I go anywhere, I don't see any white-only signs. I don't, I promise you. I am a black man that represents a white majority district in Texas. The great-great-grandson of a man born on a plantation stands before you today as a proud conservative Republican from Texas, as a believer and follower in Christ, and as a believer in what this country can be if we allow equality for not just Muslim Americans, not just Buddhist Americans, but also Christian Americans like yourself. God bless you, young man. You give me a lot of hope for the future of this country. Thank you for having the courage to yield back the remainder of my time.
I mean, Christina, the point is, I think we approach this two different ways. One is you go win the seat. If you're the best candidate, you win. And on the Democratic side, a lot of these voting rights districts were created specifically to keep black Democrats in power.
Yeah, I think I love what Julian said. I think he's exactly right. This is not about racism. And the problem that we're having, why we're not seeing, I think, faster progress on this, because I think on the conservative side, everyone's looking at this going, this isn't racism. We have no problem electing a black man president or white people electing a black man into a congressional seat. The issue that we have is Democrats, a radical wing of the Democrat Party, are gaining popularity, whether it's through social media or being aggressive. People who feel like the government's not doing enough and they want fighters on their sides. Democrats really have kind of tapped into that fighter kind of socialist movement. And we have Republicans, the career established Republicans that have been in office forever, who have not had to play these kind of political tit for tat games like gerrymandering and having to, break constitutional principles in order to fulfill their political mandate. They're now stuck in the middle going, wait a second, we have these radical leftists on the left doing crazy things where we've never had to worry about gerrymandering or packing the Supreme Court or any of this. But then you also have the MAGA movement, the America First movement, whatever you want to call it, the Donald Trump movement, saying we want fighters too. We want people in there who are going to hold the line, keep our values, not pack the Supreme Court. And you have a Republican Party kind of caught in the middle going, well, we're not used to fighting. We've been here for 40 years and we haven't had to fight, or 30 years. And so now they're trying to gain ground. And that's why I think you have some of these more firebrand type Republicans that are gaining traction with their following, because people want the fighters. And it's going to take fighters to get to weed out what we're seeing coming from Democrats, because they're good at what they're doing. They have a very small, honestly, kind of weird view of how the nation wants to go that I don't think very many people agree with, but they're pushing it and they're effectively making a change with a small number of people. And so Republican constituents are finally going, fight, somebody fight. And I think that's probably largely why Donald Trump won, because they didn't care about his personal story. He came in, he's brash, he fights, he throws his weight around and he does what the people actually want him to do. And so I think the Republican Party needs to take a note from that and say, you can't play politics the way you've been playing politics. Democrats, they're breaking the knives out, not trying to get violent or anything, but they're bringing out new weapons that really haven't been used before, and Republicans need to respond in kind, or they're getting roughshod, run over by a small minority.
It's funny, guys. You talk about this fight, and I agree with you 100%, Christina. Like, I feel like Donald Trump taught us that, like, stand up, speak up, go out there and fight. I think what's frankly taking Democrats and I think some of the media, et cetera, off guard is that we haven't been very effective in the past. And finally, they're like, oh my God, you guys can actually punch back a little. Like, we're not used to this. You guys, I mean, I think they've controlled largely the narrative, and to suddenly see Republicans fight. It's interesting though, because Chloe, I want to turn this a little, because one of the things that, if you had asked me, I don't know, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, about any prospects that Republicans had in California, I would have said, like, whatever, who cares? Like, that's a waste of a discussion. Now there's a potential, and I still, again, I think it's a bank shot at best, that we finish 1-2 in the governor's race. And then this whole race for LA mayor, I think has taken a very interesting turn. Again, I would have said Spencer Pratt was, some kind of stunt running for political office. But he is sort of showing, and I think in a different way than Christina is talking about, but that there's this new way of advertising, of talking to people, of showing you can fight. Here he is at a Dodgers game. This is what he was tweeting out. Take a look.
This is where Mayor Bass lives. You notice something? Or here, where Nithya Raman's $3 million mansion sits. They don't have to live in the mess they've created where you live. This is where I live. They let my home burn down. I know what the consequences of failed leadership are. That's why I'm running for mayor. For my sons and the rest of us Angelinos that want to stop these corrupt politicians from destroying our city. We are going to get the golden age of Los Angeles back.
Now, obviously, Chloe, there is some debate about whether he lives in the Airstream or not. I've heard all that. I don't really care if we want to talk about that. That's fine. But I think the broader point is, here he is. He suffered in the Palisades fire. His home was burnt down. And instead of just campaigning on the issues, I don't know. I find it like a breath of fresh air to say, hey, this is what's at stake. It's a different way of advertising, of talking to voters that I haven't seen Republicans communicate.
Yeah, well, this goes to what Julian was saying about grievance-based politics, because he is the opposite of that. People like him, Wesley Hunt, they take a difficult situation, and instead of crying and whining about it like most Democrats do, they take it and then they do the opposite, and they fight and they lead. Spencer Pratt is a leader. He obviously endured one of the worst things that could happen to a father and a family. His home burned down, and that is his lot. In the video that he made, he said, "This is where I live." That was where he lived. He probably doesn't spend every single night in that trailer, but that was where his property was. And then because of Democrat policies, it burnt to the ground. And because he has the opposite of a victimhood mentality, he is able to lead. And I think he is campaigning on very simple premises. He wants to free the streets of LA from feces, from drug zombies. He wants to make it so that Los Angelinos can take their kids out to the park without running into a coke addict. And so I think, he's rightfully so pulling ahead. But what's craziest to me about all of this is that Karen Bass is still leading in the polls, even though she stands for the exact opposite of what most Californians want. So I hope that he can pull out a victory there. I don't know if he exactly will, but if more candidates can run on the things that he is running for, common sense principles, I think Republicans and independents like that could do a really good job of taking back America.
Julian, you mentioned the party moving to the left, common sense, all this stuff. Does Spencer Pratt appeal to enough people in LA, which would be your heart? There's a big liberal enclave there, right? Hollywood types, etc. Does that message resonate at all, or is that too extreme to appeal to enough people that they'd have to leave the Democratic voting bloc and come over and vote for Spencer Pratt against Karen Bass? Is this a lot of pundits making something of it, or do you go, he's actually might be onto something?
No, he's real, and he represents, I think, a new form of politics, which is influencer politics, which is exactly what Zoran Mandami ran on.
Right.
My favorite book, one of my favorite books in the last couple of years, was Ross Douthat's The Decadent Society. And in that book, he talks about how great civilizations, they hit a point where they have an enormous amount of abundance, but the polity becomes very restless. And I think that's where we're at right now. We've never had it better in any civilization in the history of humanity than residents of the United States have it today. Things are really good, notwithstanding the fact you hear concerns about affordability, so on and so forth. But in Douthat's theory, you hit a certain point in the civilizational arc where people become decadent, they become very restless, and they sort of almost look for reasons to be unhappy, which I think is a lot of what the Democratic grievance politics is about. And what he is doing is exactly what Zoran Mandami did, which he is captivating the new media, which is influencer media, online media, and very cleverly tapping into where voters are restless. And they have good reasons to be restless and unhappy, given the governance in California, which has been failed leadership at the state level and at the local level in California. So what I think he's doing is as good as his tactic is, which is that Democratic governance has failed most people. And I agree that's an accurate indictment for a lot of big city mayors. But I think it's the tactic. It's the use of this social media. It's exactly what Zoran Mandami did. And I think that's where we're headed. I don't think it's a highbrow or high-minded form of politics. I think it sort of lends to a lot of sort of cheap shots and superficial, sort of bumper sticker type politics. But it is where we're at right now, and he's doing it really well.
Christina, you were nodding your head. I wonder. I mean, Julian's right. Zoran Mandami, love him or hate him, right? The guy, his ad campaign, was epic, and I you got to give him credit for how well he played the game. Like, he was out there talking about the price of food cart prices, and I mean, like, in a way that tapped into voters. Clearly, he's young, had some very controversial, to say the least, positions. Yeah. And yet he won, because I think what sometimes the professional class in politics overlooks is what Spencer Pratt is now doing, tapping into something that says, yeah, he might be extreme, but he's actually talking about something that I really care about. In Zoran Mandami's case, it was prices. In Spencer Pratt's case, it's like, hey, my home got burned down. There's homeless people. There's stuff. I mean, like, and it's like, until you fix that, I don't care about the other issues, right? And I wonder if this is where we're headed.
100%. I mean, the political class is who most Americans look at as the ones who are lying to us on both sides. Both sides look at the people who have been in office for 40 years going, I'm struggling. My family's worse off than it was the year before, and then the year before that, and the year before that. And you all keep talking about what you're going to do. And it's been a decade now, 2 decades, 3 decades, and nothing's different. So I think people inherently distrust the overly polished politician. And then you have someone like a Donald Trump, like a Zoran Mandami, like a Spencer Pratt, who just comes out and says what they think. And right or wrong, there are things that could be polished on all of those candidates, but people appreciate the authenticity and say, I don't know if he's right, but I don't think he's lying to me. And I think whether Zoran Mandami was lying or incompetent and didn't know, that we can debate that another time. But people resonate with people that they feel like get them. And that's hard to do. You can't fake that as a candidate. That has to be authentic, because if it's not authentic, everybody's going to know. And so I don't think we're going to see a whole, new class of these type of people taking over Washington, D.C. and taking over different state offices. But I think we're going to see a new wave of these people hopefully popping up in strategic locations, because you can't create it. You can't manufacture that. That has to just be real.
That's the truest thing. Like, you can't pretend to be real. You either can pull that off, and I think Spencer Pratt does it. I think Zoran Mandami does it. Yeah. There are people that come across as real and authentic. You can't, and that's the biggest problem, is some politicians are like, tell me what to say. And it's like, you just failed the test right off the bat. Yeah. I will ask you.
Do you think that's right? Because I got to tell you, I think Spencer Pratt is real. I don't think Zoran Mandami is real. I don't think he knows what he's doing. I don't think he is.
I didn't say he knows what he's doing, but when he talks about like the prices, that's not rehearsed. I actually think that he means it. I don't know that he knows how to fix it.
Yeah, he thought he could give everybody free bus fare. Right. Like, he was totally wrong and incompetent, but he genuinely believed it.
That's the
yeah. Right. But my point is, I think in this new type of politics, and I do think it's going to spring up. I think it's going to become the new form of politics. I think you can sell snake oil, and so long as you hit on a grievance that resonates.
Right. But there's a difference, Julian, between Christina saying, I think he meant it. I wouldn't want to give everyone free buses. I don't think he actually knew how to do it. That's separate.
Maybe I don't know, because I think he is. I think he's a charlatan. I think he's an anti-Semite. I think he's a charlatan.
Oh, that too, yeah.
And what I worry about in this new media is the rise of the non-substantive demagogue that I think he is. So I worry about I embrace it. I know it's here. I know it's real. And I take Christina's point about sort of authenticity. But I worry about what it does to the polity, what it does to the discourse. I worry that it brings it down.
All right, let me go. I just want to go around the horn real quick, and then I want to move on to one more thing before we get to winners and losers. The latest Emerson College poll has Spencer Pratt gaining. Okay, let me just give you a sense of where the race is right now. So in March, Karen Bass led Spencer Pratt 20% to 10%. Okay. And then there's a bunch of undecideds. At that time, it was 51%, and there's a bunch of other random candidates. So remember, it was 2010 and then 51% undecided a lot. That's March. Just got out of the field with this new Emerson poll. Same outfit, goes back in, checks it out. Karen Bass is now at 30%. Spencer Pratt is at 22%. Undecided down to 16. Obviously, people are coalescing. And again, some other folks, there's another guy, Rahman at 19, Adam Miller at 7, Ray Huang at 4. But Pratt is gaining. He went from 10 to 22. Karen Bass, obviously, from 20. Just real quick, yes, or give me a name. When this is all said and done, Chloe, who wins this race, Bass or Pratt?
I actually think Pratt might pull it out in the end,
right,
because he really is winning the social media game, like Julian was saying. And that's where all the young people are, such as myself. It's very, very important.
Julian, who wins?
Same trajectory as Mandami, who started at 1%, but I think the machine is so strong in LA that the Democratic incumbent wins. I would like to see Pratt win.
Yeah, I'd like to win too, but I agree with you. Christina,
the
Bob.
Tough, yeah.
Yeah, I think, oh God, I don't want to say Karen Bass, but overcoming the universal mail-in ballots is going to be really tough. You know what? I'm going to say Pratt. That's what I want to happen.
Well, no, look, I would like to Pratt win, right? Okay, but
Yeah.
I agree with what you said and Julian. Like, at the end of the day, the machine there knows what's at stake, and they're going to get their vote out. They're going to get the union folks out. They got to do this. The last race I want to talk to you real quick before I get to winners and losers is J.D. Vance addressed this Marco Rubio thing that keeps getting teased out. He tried to put a pin in it yesterday by saying, I don't want to talk about this anymore. I'm focused on my job. Marco's a good friend. Chloe, I don't see how this ends, though. Everybody that I talk to who knows I'm in politics and knows, says, what do you think about the race? Because, that's what we do. I think J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio both want to focus on their job. I don't think we're going to get to that point.
I don't think we are either. And to put a button in the Spencer Pratt thing, as the people on X are saying, we should all just drive to California and vote in November because they do not check IDs. But as for the Marco Rubio, JD Vance thing, you obviously just did a little book tour at Heritage, and I was there hearing you talk about this very thing. And I agree with you that I think the two of them on the ticket together is the only way we really hammer home a win in 2028. And obviously that would be JD Vance at the top, Marco Rubio as vice president. Also, Marco Rubio has not resigned from his position as Secretary of State. I believe he would have to do that very soon if he was going to run for the vice presidency. He's obviously not. They are good buddies. I think they know that the two of them together with JD Vance at the top would be the only ticket that delivers Republicans a win. And I think they know that that is what the nation needs first and foremost. Also, they are going to focus on their roles. They are both excelling in their jobs. And I mean, they're putting it out there for all of the people to hear. I don't know why nobody's listening. Maybe
Julian,
they just really want Marco Rubio to win. I'm not sure.
Well, Julian, as a Democrat, do you think that this Vance Rubio ticket would be something that Democrats would fear, or would they be like, great, good, two of you together, we'll take you both?
No, I just wrote a piece about this a couple of weeks ago, Sean, for the Washington Times, where I said that Rubio is the Democrats' worst nightmare. If you look at what Rubio did when he spoke in Munich, he had the European liberal elites eating out of his hand, all of them praising, complimenting him for what he, in his speech, testified to as a rebuke of European Western decadence. And he sort of had all of them agreeing with him. And he can translate, as you saw that in his press conference a couple of weeks ago, he brings that intangible quality that Ronald Reagan had, which is sunny optimism.
Yeah.
And you package that together with a Hispanic vote. I would flip what Chloe said. I would have Rubio, Vance, although I think that's hard to do with with Vance being vice president. But you have Rubio at the top of the ticket, and I think Republicans win in a landslide. Mm-hmm. And if the Republican Party is smart, that's the way they go. I think Vance is probably the highest IQ politician in America, but he doesn't have that optimism. There's a little bit of a dourness to him, and people don't like it.
It's a different story. And I think Rubio can talk about, fleeing Cuba and communism. It's very real. Obviously, JD's got his own story. All right, I want to get to winners and losers. Christina, you get to go first because you're next. Let me just start with winners, and because I want to get to my loser, and I guarantee you, everyone always gets to. I always get taken my loser, but this one I think I got a good one. So let's start with winners. Let's do them quick, and then we'll get to losers. Who do you think won the week?
Well, I gotta say, Spencer Pratt, I think he nailed the recent ads that came out. I know we've been talking about him, but he nailed the debate. He nailed his ads. He's got a lot of great AI generated ads, and I think he's hitting the mark in a new type of campaign like we discussed. I think Spencer Pratt.
Okay. Chloe, who do you think won the week?
Maybe Wes Hunt. I thought he delivered. I loved that speech that he gave in Congress the other day.
All right, Julian, who do you think? And again, we don't really care. It can be non-political, whatever. Who do you think had a good week?
Well, I don't want to be repetitive, but I think it's Marco Rubio, because everybody has this conversation on the tip of their lips now, and I think everyone knows that Rubio is a very, very appealing, widely appealing candidate, and I think including Vance.
Well, I can't believe I always think by the time I go, I usually have a backup. This time no one took it. My winner of the week is James Blair, the White House political guru that is kind of leaving to oversee the elections and then hopefully coming back. But he put all of his chips on this redistricting effort. And I think for a little while, people were pointing their finger and saying, I can't believe we did all this. And now they're like, hey, congratulations, James. Well done. So he played the long game. Slow and steady wins the race sometimes. So James Blair is my winner of the week for what he has done to put us in a position with these seats. Now let's get to losers. Christina, who do you think did not have a good week?
And I'm blanking on her name, the California public official who was arrested or indicted for being a CCP agent.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she was a mayor, right? Or was she?
The mayor, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's
Eileen.
You're really not supposed to do that.
Yeah, that's a bad look.
That's not a good look for you.
No.
Chloe, give us your first take on who you thought had a bad week.
Xavier Becerra, because it just
Javier Becerra.
The clip of Javier, yes. He lost 85,000 children under Joe Biden as the HHS secretary, and now that's going viral again.
Yeah, unbelievable. I mean, again, at some point we'll get back to this race in California. I can't believe he ended up being somewhat of the beneficiary of Swalwell dropping out. Julian, who do you think lost the week?
Hakeem Jeffries, a lot of huffing and puffing. Sky is falling, and he can't deliver.
I can't. All right. Well, look, I had a loser. I actually was going to say Joe Biden for a little while because he's trying to block the record, these audio tapes of him talking to his biographer. But something happened Sunday night that I actually I tuned into this roast of Kevin Hart. In full disclosure, I was organizing some stuff. It was on Netflix. I thought the roast of Tom Brady was funny, a little irreverent. But it was funny. And I thought, okay, now I want to see if they can do it again with Kevin Hart, right? And I think Shane Gillis is really funny. So I thought, okay, he's hosting this thing. I was hugely disappointed. And I think it just wasn't funny. It was bad. And then it went from bad to offensive. And as you guys recall, at a roast, you roast everybody who's there, not just the person. And so I warn the viewers right now, this is offensive. What Pete Davidson, you remember him from Saturday Night Live, he got up and started talking and making fun of other people at the roast. I'm warning you now, this is truly offensive, but this is what Pete Davidson had to say.
Tony Hinchcliffe is here, looking like both a child molester and the doll they give the child to show where he touched them. Tony reminds me of Charlie Kirk, in that he's definitely been on camera letting a guy unload in his throat. Oh, you don't know me?
So, look, Davidson goes on and then makes another joke where he says, I was in a beef with Kanye, so I've taken more shots from better gay Nazis too. I don't find that any of that funny. In fact, I mean, it really was kind of disgusting. And I was shocked that there wasn't more outrage, guys. I got to be honest. Like, again, I'm someone who has a pretty thick skin when it comes to comedy and things that can said, but it wasn't funny. And it was really disappointing to see that was somehow how people wanted to make fun of somebody. Anyway, don't mean to end on a note like that. So let's get back to the positive. Great show. Thank you guys for being here. Chloe, welcome to it. As I said, guys, remember, we got a great event tomorrow night at the Trump Kennedy Center to talk about Trump 2.0. So continue to order that on Amazon and then go to SeanSpicer.com or the Trump Kennedy Center site. The tickets are free. We'll see you tomorrow night, 6 o'clock. We'll see you back here tomorrow, though, before that with Steve Bannon. Have a great night. We'll see you then.